All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome. 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 We're going to get
There
started.
is no here, there is no there.
Yeah.
There's only the force.
Yeah, exactly. Welcome. Welcome to that. And what fitting force related material than one of what I've witnessed to be the greatest handbooks for unlocking and unleashing that force within, which is that Christic essence. And the book I'm referring to is what we're continuing on, which is the Gospel of Thomas. So we've spent the last 2 episodes in this series reading through line by line the Gospel of Thomas and just discussing what we see within it. And yeah, it's been really exciting to see, and just makes very much, it's very clear why this book was removed. I've said it before and the other 2, but it's extremely clear. This book is far too powerful to be gifted or put into the hands of people who you're trying to control and dominate. You know, the name of the game to create slaves is to condition those slaves to believing that they're not God when they inherently are. So it has to be done methodically, consistently, completely, and you can't have sources like this out there that give too much away, because as soon as that's discovered, as soon as that's remembered, then there's no slave game any longer, and the slave masters, or the wannabe slave masters, they lose. So let's keep going in the Gospel of Thomas today. And I'm excited to be joined by Darth Phaedrus here sitting next to me. So welcome, brother. Thanks for being here. And yeah, I see also on the chat too, I don't know if he's able to speak much today, but if he does have any insight, and we had him on last time, but our brother Tom from All Is a Tom giving astrological insight to the things that we discover. So yeah, thanks for being here, brother. Oh, looks like he might have hopped off. So I know he's got a lot going on too. So, but all to say is that anyone is welcome to tune in or chime in to the conversation. So if you're reading along and you see something, a word, anything stands out to you, or even if you just have a particular question about something we've discussed, or anything related to today's topic, feel free to jump in. So, as we've done before, I'm just going to share a screen, and we're going to go right to where we left off last time. So let me get that ready. All right, here we go. So last week we left off with the verse 31. So just continuing on, starting at verse 32. It says, Ieshua said, a strong city built upon a high mountain cannot be destroyed, cannot be hidden. So what is he saying here? Is he saying that, we need to go, any cities built on low grounds, we need to demolish and go build all our cities high up on the mountain? Are we supposed to read this literally? Or are we supposed to take a deeper look into this and see, is this city referencing us? Is this the temple within? You know, are you that city? And are we to build ourselves upon a high mountain? Because from that point, we cannot be destroyed and we cannot be hidden. So yeah, I mean, I feel like it's pretty straightforward, as long as you don't jump straight to the literal interpretation of it. Do you see anything else?
Well, the strong city is the teachings of the way, the ancient way that Ieshua was initiated into, and it's built in a high mountain, and that it's close to heaven, and because it's founded in heaven and it's not founded here on earth, it can't be destroyed. You can't destroy the truth, and it wasn't going to be hidden, because now that Christ had arrived and was speaking these truths, the whole world was going to see it. And the whole world would not be able to destroy this simplest of truth. It's to tell someone that, hey, listen, you're God and I'm God, and because there isn't anyone else to be. it's such a simple, obvious truth.
It really is.
And that, and it's really founded. There's no way to defeat it. It's just, it's self-evident, and but it's so simple that many people have gone their entire lives. They've lived out the entire life of the persona, and they never grasped it, and they never saw it. And yet it's undeniable. And once that truth comes out, that God is within you, because that's who you are, and there's anyone else to be. And therefore, since that's who you are, you don't need to go through anyone else to get to the highest truth. And no one can take it. Who can take you from yourself? It's impossible. And the idea in of itself, because it is built on the high mountain, it's indefeatable. And should the whole world throw itself at it, the whole world will fall and fail. And it's not going to be hidden. And so now that these truths are coming out again, the world once again will be transformed.
Yeah.
It's inevitable.
Right.
It may take, it may take a little while, a medium amount of time. It may take a lifetime at worst. But it is inevitable now that this truth has been spoken again, and is being spoken by more and more people. It will overturn the world the same way that the original teachings of Jesus Christ, the first time around, overturned the Roman Empire. And the Roman Empire, with all of its legions and all of its soldiers and all of its banking systems and all of its traditions, fell to that one simple truth. And all this has happened before and will happen again, and is happening now. We're seeing it happen again.
Yeah.
And it's just getting started, because we're still the minority of people saying this message. And but we're not going to stop speaking it, and no one can take it from us. And it's just going to build up. I mean, Christ started with 12, right? And from there, it took over the whole world and built an empire that lasted for 1,000 years.
Yep. Yeah. And he, even though the teachings didn't completely set in the times of Ieshua, he did, through these teachings, build that strong city on that high mountain, and try as they might, they could not destroy it, and try as they might, they could not hide it. Even removing or trying to remove certain books away from his teachings, and so we don't see them, they wash up at some point or another. They're discovered at some point or another, because this has the energy behind it of the divine.
That's right.
Yeah. So moving on to verse 33, powerful number. Ieshua said, "What you hear with your ears, tell it to other ears, and proclaim it from the rooftops. No one lights a lamp so that it will be put under a basket or hidden somewhere. Rather, one puts it upon a stand, so that all who enter and leave may see the light." Does it continue?
I'm not sure how much I agree with that specific translation. There's a potential for a slightly variation of what that could mean.
All right.
So I'm gonna put a little twist on it. What you hear with one of your ears, tell it to your other ear, and then proclaim it on the roof. Okay, so what he's saying is that, because we have two different, because remember earlier in the document, he was saying that, well, let me switch to it.
So you're saying it's possible it's to distinguish between each of the ears, to distinguish between left and right hemisphere kind of thing?
It's, well, between fleshly ears and spiritual ears.
Okay.
So he was saying, well, now I've gone all the way to the beginning.
And then the second portion is a bit more straightforward while he's looking for that. And it's consistent with other biblical teachings of letting that light shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. You know, that sort of, which is very, very straightforward.
Okay.
Because as we let this chrism oil rise within us and we begin to illuminate, we're not to hide it or to share it. And that's how it emanates and spreads and becomes this contagious, beautiful thing to spread and share.
Okay, so earlier in verse 22, he was talking about when you make the two into one and you make the inner like the outer and the high like the low. And then he says, when you have eyes in your eyes, a hand in your hand, a foot in your foot, and an icon in your icon. So this is a similar concept where he's saying that there's more than one way to see. You can see with your spiritual eyes and see with your fleshly eyes. You can hear with your spiritual ears to hear the spiritual meaning, or you can hear with your fleshly ears and you're just hearing just the words, right? And the literal interpretation. So he's saying that when you hear with one of your ears, make sure that you tell it to the other and proclaim it to the rooftop. And the rooftop would be the highest part of your crown or your head. He's viewing your body as a building. And he's saying, make sure that both of your ears are in agreement, and that the spiritual person that you really are, which is the Christ, should be in agreement with your persona. See, so Justin has his persona. He is Justin and I am Darth, right? And we're two different people. But within us is the same Christ. And that's the way that it is. So we have like Tracy, right? She's a completely different persona, living in a completely different place, born in a completely different time. And yet when you go to the kernel of her being, you find the same Christ. And it's the same Christ in every person, but there's many different ways that singular Christ can manifest. And so my persona has to be in agreement with the Christ and within me, and his persona has to be in agreement with the Christ within him. And then together we're all collectively in agreement with the collective Christ. And that way we're in harmony, like a bunch of dancers or a good team. That's a great feeling when you're a team and you're all moving in unison and you're all moving as one organism. That's a powerful feeling. Okay, so he's saying that your persona, both your ears, they have to bring them together and proclaim it onto the rooftops. And he's saying, no one lights a lamp so that it's put under a basket or hidden somewhere. So you don't want to have that truth within you and then hide it from yourself. Mm-hmm. And this is what a lot of people do, is they're confronted with some painful truth. And it's not painful to the Christ, it's painful to the persona, mm-hmm. right? And so they deny the light and they bury it down deep. And then the persona gets separated from the Christ within. No, that's not what you do. You take that light that's within you and you raise it up high so that it illuminates both your persona and your body. And then everyone that enters into your life, they can see that Christ within. They can see that you're lit. And that's a phrase that we use. Hey, the light's on, but no one's home, right? So, or you can say, oh, I looked in his eyes and it was just pure darkness, dead eyes, right? So this is a concept that we all should be familiar with. And so now we're being confronted with this truth that Ieshua just told us, that he says that there's going to be, that there's a teaching that's on top of the mountain and it can't be defeated. And he's telling us, listen, you're learning this truth now. Okay, and you're hearing with one of your ears, make sure you unify it with both of your ears. Make sure you take this teaching that I've just given you and make sure you put it up high in your body, high in the house that is the temple that is your body. And make sure that everyone can see. Let your light shine to be an illuminator.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, what you mentioned as far as that split reality that we can succumb to when we do this, when we ignore the Christ within, when we ignore that divine tug. That's exactly what we were discussing. Lila and I were discussing in the recent show on spiritual bypassing. To when you have that divine influence of this is where that's leading me. This is what the Christ is leading me to do. But the persona, the ego, is uncomfortable because doing that continues to expose the persona, and it continues to expose and it doesn't like being exposed. It doesn't like dealing with discomfort, so it ignores that, it negates it, and it tries to use other ways to fool you into thinking, oh no, I am actually the Christ, and that other thought is what's wrong, or that's what you should avoid. So yeah, it's a great connecting point to that show, which was phenomenal too, if you didn't get a chance to listen.
And he's also mentioning that there's going to be conflict between not just with the Christ within and the persona that you have, but there's all the attachments that our persona has in our lives that we've built up. Attachments to friends, attachments to religious organizations, attachments to financial institutions and financial situations.
Status.
What happens if you're, say, for example, let's say you work at a factory and you're pumping out vaccines, right? And then one day that Christ within you lights up, and now there's a conflict between your persona, which wants the so-called security of the job, right? What happens if you quit that job? What is your wife and kids going to say, or what's your husband going to say, or what's your boss going to say? How are you going to make your car payments? But none of that's a problem for the Christ within, but it might be a problem for the persona. And then, are you going to lose friendships? Are you going to lose attachments? So there's going to be a battle between the world outside the persona and the light that's within, that comes from above. And Christ is saying, listen, if you hear with one ear, make sure you hear it with both. Let your light shine, put it on high. It has to be higher than everything else, that attachment to Christ.
Yep. Yeah, beautifully said. Full alignment. That's the only way the Christ can flow through, and through every action is that alignment. Yeah. All right. Move on to the next verse here, verse 34. 34 is grace. So Ieshua said, when a blind person leads another blind person, they both fall into a pit. So pretty straightforward. Sort of a follow-up of the last one as well. If we are not able to see, then don't lead. Don't try and, the blind leading the blind, as they say. So that one's pretty simple, straightforward, at least initially. Do you see anything deeper in that?
No, it's pretty straightforward. So he's giving us the contrast. He's saying that his teaching was going to overcome the world, and he's saying make sure that you're unified. And he says if you close your eyes to the light that's within, you become blind, and then you're going to fall into a pit.
Yep. All right. So reading on to verse 35, Ieshua said, one cannot capture the house of the strong except by tying their hands. Then everything can be overturned. One cannot capture the house of the strong except by tying their hands. Then everything can be overturned. So maybe this is by tying the hands, referencing that it's not a physical struggle. It's not, and so we tie the hands because they represent that physical connection. But it's only when we surrender that we can truly, because you can't take heaven by force. You can't enter the kingdom of heaven through that consistent effort physically. Yeah.
So he's talking about, we're still on the topic of the conflict between the world and the light. And so the house of the strong man, well, it doesn't say man, it just says the house of the strong. So the house is Babylon or Egypt. It's the system of systems, right? And the strong are those that are taking advantage of the weak. And it's their system. Okay, you walk into a courthouse, you're walking into their system. That's not, the courthouse with its, its flag with the gold fringes and their necromancy and their admiralty law. That's not God's law. Okay, God's law is the law of the jungle. That's the law of nature. But when you walk into their system, that's where their power is. And so Ieshua is saying that he was fully intending, listen, we are going to capture the house of the strong man, but we have to tie their hands. Once we tie their hands, then we can overturn their entire system of systems. But the way of tying their hands is getting rid of the fear of death and educating the people that they don't need these people. They don't need the system of systems in order to approach God. So right now, everyone is terrified of death. But once we realize, well, no, you're not the persona, you're the Christ within, and the Christ within can't possibly die because it's eternal. And so death is not something to be feared. You tie the hands of the system. What is the system going to do to you now? Nothing. There's nothing they can do. They can kill the body, but they can't kill the spirit. And we get to reincarnate back into the Christ. And then that takes their power. And then once we've tied their hands, because we're no longer afraid and they can't make us afraid, now we can overturn their world. And so that's part of what we're going to see is as people get more and more educated, and they get less and less dependent on that system of systems, then that system will be overturned and reversed. And then, so Ieshua, because this is all about war between good and evil, between Ieshua and the Christ and the Antichrist. So the next verse, he's going to give us encouragement to continue on in overturning that system of systems.
Right. And that's what the Christic team have been doing, is focusing on tying their hands, tying the hands of the Canaanite system, so that it could not, because it's like it replicates itself, right? So if you don't address the problem at the root, then it's just going to keep creating more issues. So that's what, I like that. That's a good point there.
The other thing about overturning is if you go into a house and you overturn everything, you're ransacking it. What is it you're doing? You're looking for something, and you're showing everyone that look what's in the cabinets, look what's in the basement, look what they were doing in this room. You tear down the walls. Hey, look, a hidden room. Who's in this hidden room? What were they doing to this person? So that's part of what's happening. Even just today, the JFK files were released, right? And so now those files are now being carefully overturned. People are sifting through them. What can we find? Oh, what did the CIA do? Oh, what did the State of Israel do? Who was involved here? Who was this? They're overturning the files. They're searching through it. Mm-hmm. And why was that able to be done? Because their hands were tied. They stopped that file from being released for decades, but now their hands are tied. So now it's being overturned. So we're literally seeing the fulfillment of these scriptures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Why? Because a certain someone isn't afraid of dying.
Right.
And because he's unified with the Christ within, they seem to have a bit of a trouble killing him.
Right.
Game over.
Yeah. All right. So verse 36, Ieshua said, "Do not worry from morning to evening, or from evening to morning, about having clothes to wear." So is he just focusing on clothes, or you can hear the disciples again, like, oh, what about other things? Do we worry about other things? No, clothes is just a representation of worry in general. We don't need to be consumed with physicality and our appearance. Clothes can represent your attachment to reputation, how people perceive you, or any of that. So don't be focused on the outward appearance, because it's yeah, I mean, it's worthless to spend time on that.
So this is such a poetic verse. Everything he says is poetic. So he reverses it. So first he says morning to evening, then it says evening to morning. So he's saying don't worry about the future and don't worry about your past, about having clothes to wear. So he's talking about your persona. So here his disciples were going to go forth into the world spreading his teaching that everyone has the Christ within. But these people were not, they didn't have political power. They didn't have massive financial power. They didn't have massive reputations. They were the lowly ones. And that's kind of the position that we're in. Okay. So I don't have the most glorious of personas. I have all kinds of records and issues and problems and embarrassments and failures in my past. But because now that I have the strength of the Christ within, I'm not worried about my persona. My persona is now transformed. And the same way that we take off a shirt and put on a new shirt, I've let go of that old persona. I may look the same. I may have the same legal name. I'm living at the same address, but I am most certainly not the same person. And there's a power within me that wasn't there before. And so I'm not worried about my past, and I'm not worried about my future. I'm not worried about any of those personas, because my power comes from the Christ within.
Because you're not basing your reality off the persona, off the attachment to it.
Right. And even when I die, then the persona will be completely released. And then I'll get a new one when I reincarnate, because that's the power of the Christ. The Christ always comes back.
Yeah.
But the evil don't have that, because they let go of the Christ within and they attach themselves completely to their persona, and the persona does not reincarnate.
Right.
It's just a shirt. This one gets, the shirt gets ruined and it gets destroyed. I'm not worried about this shirt.
Because you're not the shirt.
I'm not the shirt. I'm the man in the shirt.
I'm not the persona. I'm not the identity. I'm not the reputation. I'm not the status, the possessions, any of that.
Right. You're the Christ within the Justin, and I'm the Christ within the Darth.
Right.
And it's the same Christ.
Yeah. Yeah. See, we'll go with Tom and then Rowan.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I see this verse, Justin, as the same as the one that's in, I think, the book of Matthew, where it's just take no thought for your life, basically.
Yeah, exactly. In the Sermon on the Mount, where he speaks very clearly, like, consider the birds. They don't toil. They don't worry about gathering for the harvest and surviving the winter. And they do just fine, but are you not greater than they? Consider the lilies. They don't worry about what clothes they're going to wear or any of that kind of stuff. Are you not greater than they? So it's a very much a relational to that portion as well. So yeah, good catch there. Yeah, Rowan, did you want to jump in? Hey, brother.
Yes, brother. Yeah, it's kind of delayed here getting on to it's part 3 we're at, and I missed the first 2 parts, so there's a lot to catch up on, but that's homework for later. I just wanted to ask a question regarding this whole thing about clothes, because this verse is very clear in what it means, and we're having a great conversation about it. However, Donald Trump, he's wearing a pretty nice suit most of the time. And there was that interview with Zelensky that, was most likely scripted and all that stuff, right? But is that he was being roasted for not wearing a suit. And in this hilarious game of politics or politricks, we seem to see them all wearing a certain type of clothing, or I just call it all camouflage. It's all military, basically. And he's playing his part, and there's this kind of like a double-edged question, so I'll just leave it as best as I know how. Is Donald Trump and every other president or any political figure of any kind, regardless of the country, is always wearing a nice suit. And I have to admit, I think a dude looks pretty sharp in a good suit, regardless of his age. I mean, it commands respect. Even Jesus wore certain colors during certain sermons, or depending on like the level of the importance, or I've noticed the size of the crowd or whatever he was addressing to that crowd, colors and certain aspects about the clothes seem to have some significance. And I know we're not supposed to take any thought for our own lives, and like that example or that verse you mentioned of the birds, like God takes care of them, what makes you think he wouldn't take care of you? And with all these parts being played, it seems that certain, I don't want to say uniforms are used, but in order to participate and to infiltrate the infiltrators and to take down the cabal and stuff, certain camouflage or, clothes and basically appearances of authority have had to be used. And it's like using their own weapons against them. So I'm very curious about that and what you guys can maybe share your thoughts on regarding how that really works and the purpose of it, if we shouldn't even take thought for our own lives in that sense, like the outward appearance, like the car that we drive, or if we have a car at all, the house that we live in, like all those things are intertwined, because it seems that no matter what, as much as we agree about this, it seems that outward projected status of material possessions and things, clothes, money, everything involved, it does have a place, and it's just raging in my ears. Like, that exists for a reason, but I don't think this really gets talked about much. So pardon me if I'm not really projecting this question very accurately, but it's the first time I've really asked about it. So thanks for your patience in listening to it. And hopefully, you guys can share some good old wisdom on what some of this might all mean. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Rowan. It's a great question, and the kind of a multi-part to it. So I'll address the parts concerning maybe colors that Yeshua might have worn in various sermons. So I would just anytime colors are mentioned in these ancient texts, it's not, colors are representative of much more than just the simple colors. And so whether he actually wore those things, or whether the parables and stories are made to represent various of the 7 colors or the 7 chakras, because each of them indicate different characteristics and are linked to different emotions and linked to different levels and layers within this experience. Not that one is necessarily higher than or worse than the others. I mean, of course, like physically within us, it's that case, but each of those kind of show up in different ways. So if a color is referenced in the Bible or wherever else, try and link it to what is that chakra and what might be referenced within that. That's what I always go to within that. So yeah, I'll just say that part there, with as far as like Jesus potentially wearing different robes or whatever, because who knows what he did at the time, and how much of these stories are actually literal. And as far as Trump goes, and the suit, and you nailed it as far as like needing to do those things to play a part in order to dismantle this system. So when you have a whole society created from this status dominating hierarchy where everyone's all about controlling somebody else, and you have to appear this certain way in order to gain this level, and the suits and ties are always at the top in some people's minds. He's got to do that for this time in order to appeal to particular audience and appeal to the conditioning of the people. So they're conditioned in this way to view that as a power status. And the conversation with Zelensky, I don't know the bigger meaning behind why they might have done something that, or alluded to that. I mean, it was a reporter who asked him that question. So whether that reporter scripted or not, or it was just a question to ask him, I don't know. But that's the reason why Trump, he's got to appear these certain ways. And as soon as this is all dismantled, if anyone is still touting status or appearance and basing it off of how you dress and how you look, then that's going to be much more obvious as deviating away from the Christic way, which is not about that at all, not about the materials. Of course, we can still have nice clothes and dress up and do that, but it's like we're not attached to that anymore, and it doesn't indicate necessarily a status. What's going to be much more important for us at least those who are truly following the Christic way, is how much are you embodying that Christ in each and every moment, which in these words have nothing to do with appearance, and they don't. So yeah, it's just something that happens in the meantime. It's like, I'll give another example. Like, a lot of people have issue with the fact that like RFK Jr. held up a Thanksgiving turkey and was like talking about frying a turkey and this is the best way to do it and blah, blah, blah. Well, I guarantee you he's not touching that turkey. He doesn't eat meat. He's not going to do any of that kind of stuff. So it's like, why is he doing something like that? Why is he appearing like he's doing this? Do you know how many conservative men gained so much more confidence in him, became so much more comfortable in him when they could relate to something like that? You know, all these meat-eating people, which everyone's going through and at their different stages of their journey. So for him to display that is necessary in order to help bring in that extra emphasis and allow that message to reach a wider audience, whereas otherwise it would have just been turned away. So that's sort of the same things used of reasons why certain dress might need to be worn or lines need to be said, or however the roles are played within this movie that's dismantling that old system. It has to be done methodically, and in order to appeal to people who have been conditioned in sorts of ways, this is the best way to do it. So that's my take. But yeah, I'd love to hear, Darth, if you have anything else on that.
Well, as far as why President Trump dresses a certain way at the White House, you go to a nice restaurant and there's a dress code. There's some facilities, fine facilities, you can't get in without a tux, right? And because clothing is literally magic. You put someone in a certain type of clothing, and other people see them differently, and people will see themselves differently. You know, they say if you're having a problem, you know, with depression, take a shower, clean yourself up, shave, put on a suit, dress up, take care of yourself. It changes your mood. You put someone in a doctor's uniform, and all of a sudden you'll take medicine from them, right? You'll let them draw your blood. Are they a doctor? Who knows, right? But they're wearing the suit. They're wearing the lab tech, right? And so even like with a police officer, you put someone in a police officer's uniform and they'll do things that normally they won't do. Most of us won't follow someone in a car, pull them over, and demand money from them. But if you put us in a police officer's uniform, people do all kinds of horrible things. Soldiers' uniforms. Clothing is magic. It exerts spiritual force. And also there is a dress code at the White House. You just can't get in unless you're dressed to a certain attire, because this is a center of power that's exerting force over millions of people. How many people are in the United States now? 300 million? Allegedly. Who knows? Right?
They're into 30, something like that, 350.
They know. But how do you exercise spiritual force over that many people? You got to know what you're doing. The same way that we were talking about how religious institutions are deliberately and intentionally created. Well, it's the same thing with a political institution. You just can't, build a shack and say, well, okay, well, this is the capital of my country. No one's going to follow it. There has to be energy, spiritual force. And part of that is by what you wear. And so, in bringing out that Zelensky he wasn't adhering to the dress code. And if it wasn't for who he was and what he was doing, he would never have been allowed in the building. And he wasn't showing proper respect. So an institution like the White House, this is supposed to be the most powerful house that serves the people. And there should be dignity and respect there, because they're serving the people and the people are divine. And it's an important duty. And to go in there wearing a tracksuit, it's disrespectful toward the people of America, which is what was said.
Right, and that was the narrative that needed to be conveyed on that day.
To show the buffoonery.
Right.
We're giving this guy billions of dollars and he's a buffoon. He doesn't even have a suit. and we just gave them billions of dollars. Where did that money go? So it's part of the narrative. So part of what's happening, I was having this conversation with someone the other day, and she's saying, well, why are things happening the way that they are, not exactly the way that we had hoped when we first heard about what was happening? I was saying, well, at one point, the world was highly Christic, and we didn't get to a highly anti-Christic world all in one change. It's like changing the course of a ship. You have to do it a little bit at a time. If you just yank that steering wheel over, that ship's going to roll. Everyone's going to notice, hey, we just made a massive U-turn. Things are going to spill. No, you make gradual changes, a little bit at a time, so that the ship stays stabilized. And so now we're doing the exact opposite. For several generations, the world was highly anti-Christic. And now we're turning it back around and we're putting the world back into a Christic state. But you can't do it all at once. It's too much of a change. The ship will roll. People will die. People will fall overboard. And every single life is important, especially the lives of the children. And a lot of these adults are mentally like children. They're just not there. And so we have to make small changes, a little bit at a time. Change the story just a little bit every time. And eventually we'll get back to a point where the world is highly Christic again. But it's not going to be all done at once, because the ship will roll and people will drown. And we can't have that.
Yeah, great stuff. Ron, did you have any follow-up on that?
Yeah, I loved listening to all that. That was awesome, because this, I think we're really learning a lot here, is that clothing is magic. And just like Garth said, is that you can dress up as a cop. I mean, if they find out you're doing that, you'll probably be arrested. But is that people will do things that they otherwise wouldn't do. Or like if you're a doctor, they would take medications that if a friend of theirs recommended the same medication, for example, they would not take. And you have to be like wearing this lab coat. And I have had my own experience with this, where I have never been a doctor. I am not a doctor right now, but I used to work in the cannabis retail space before the regulations here in Canada. And one of our little tricks that we use, and it wasn't my idea, so you can't charge me, is that we just started wearing white lab coats, and we were passionate and still are. I'm assuming those old colleagues of mine still are passionate about what they do, but none of us were ever doctors. But before these regulations, you could just pretty much do whatever you want and not even get in trouble for it. And we noticed a huge difference of how people listen to us, and like we weren't even trying to be manipulative, I guess you could say, to increase sales and to build trust with the targeted audience. But it went from just dressing casually to now we're wearing suits. We didn't have tags and we weren't falsely identifying as doctors. We just put on lab coats, and people listened to us like we were doctors. Of course, never claiming that we were, but we sold more. Like it was just incredible. We had name tags, and that was about it. And so it's just interesting how, like, for example, right now, Justin, you're wearing a very handsome flannel. If that's a flannel, I don't know if my screen is reflecting poorly here, but someone's gonna listen to you like over someone else. Like, how do I chop down this tree? They're gonna see a guy wearing a flannel, and they're gonna listen to that guy, and he might not have ever swung an axe in his life, right? And I'm not saying you haven't ever chopped down the tree. I'm sure you probably have. I think we all have, those of us who have gone camping. But yeah, it's interesting how one's mind is so easily adrift, and even my own. Like I catch myself listening to others who I don't even know who they are. I don't even know who their names are. And that's the issue with this, like, more like camouflage effect. It has such like a military vibe to it, where it's like all deception, where there's people online, you listen to them because of how they dress or how they even style their hair. And you, Darth, too, mentioned like even just taking a shower and you like taking care of yourself, or there's a dress code at the restaurant and you dress a certain way and it carries power. And that's where I'm so curious, is that I just question if this would ever go away, because there's the right people doing it for the right reasons, like Donald Trump is, and then there's the wrong people who, that's how they got themselves into these positions of power where they represent the people. It's supposed to be respectful. It's supposed to be Christic and for the highest of good, but they're doing it for the wrong reasons. So it's very difficult to tell who's worth listening to. And I've even had, well, we know how social media is so powerful, and that there's a lot of stuff coming out, particularly today, right after the JFK files were released. And basically, there's all this stuff coming out about Trump giving more money to Israel. We just gave Canadians, we just gave $5 billion some odd dollars to Zelensky, and now they're building a ski resort. It's like this guy that we might re-elect or newly elect named Pierre Poilievre. Like they all seem like they're just a bunch of reptiles. Not that I believe in aliens and all that, but just people wearing different camouflages and just using the same techniques. And it's like this war is going to go on for a while. And I just want to make sure that I'm doing my due diligence to study and figure out what exact suits or style of suit or the code for that fabric that's used. Like who's using what to like secretly identify to the other party or their own party, like I'm on your side or they're on that person's side. Like it seems like I'm hyper like overthinking, but really I'm just trying to do my best because even myself, I think it's nice to dress up. It's nice to look good because then people just respect you more. And I know that we're all just seeking the Christ within and just trying our best to leave behind these superficial parts of our reality, but it seems that they're also saving the good parts of our reality, these superficial qualities. And so, yeah, I don't want to hog the mic for too long here. It's just that it's very difficult to tell, well, what's really going on because it's all camouflage. And so, even our Messiah, he literally wore certain colors representing the crown, the purple, or, I've noticed that blue seems to be a suit that Donald Trump likes. So it's like there's color codes and gematria to all of this, which I'm still learning about. Like I'm struggling with gematria. Like I actually almost don't even know how to look at it. It doesn't really make sense to me. So to those of us who are trying as hard as I think I'm trying, that I'm aware, be able to be aware of, cheers to you, because this seems to be like a never-ending battle, and it's not easy. So if you guys got anything from that and have anything to say in response to it that you think is helpful, I'd love to hear it too, and I'm sure the rest of us would as well. Thanks.
Well, all I'll say on that is in his other teachings in other spaces, and he might get to it in this text as well, but he was very clear to say, beware of wolves in sheep's clothing. And he also said, ye shall know them by their fruits. So both of these teachings are to help us to not be so hyper-focused on the external and the appearance, but truly through the actions and how somebody is coming across. And that's what we're learning on a grand scale as well. So the things you mentioned as far as like billions sent to Ukraine and Canada doing this, and all of that is just the narrative that's being put out there so that we learn to know somebody by their fruits. So if we have to go through the experience of feeling embarrassed because we trusted that this money was going for this cause and it's actually being squandered for this, or like all that Doge is uncovering with all this money being wasted on various things that are just absolutely ridiculous, all of that's helping to refine that ability of our discernment, so that we're recognizing when that fruit has gone rotten, and we're not just blindly giving and continually giving. This whole great awakening is about knocking us out of our naivety, our mindless, we're just constantly giving away that innocence and trusting far too easily, and when it's not really earned. And that part of that is due to the clothing and all of that, the outward appearance and the deceptions used in that. And so the tools themselves are not the problem. It's how they're used. And if we all have that Christ within to recognize that, then we don't get deceived by these simple tactics and these tricks.
If I can add just a couple of things. So everyone's worried about the amount of money that's being sent overseas. So here's a little scenario that might change the way you see that. So let's just say that all of a sudden America gets a new currency. And in order to switch your old currency to the new currency, you have a certain amount of time to take your money your cash and walk into the bank and switch it out for the new currency. But if you're not living in America, then you're screwed. And if you don't have a legitimate connection to a legitimate American financial institution in order to transfer those funds overseas, well, then you're just you're holding a bunch of toilet paper. And I know that's I've heard from a few reputable sources that that's something that might occur, because the fact that the old American regimes encouraged counterfeiting of American currency overseas. And so there's been so much fraud done. It's almost fraud to the infinite point, which is part of the problem of why the American currency has been devalued. So I have zero concern about how much of the old money is being given away. Let them have it. It will soon be worthless. And as far as trying to decipher the world around us and who is good and who is evil, so there's an order that has to be done in order to discern truth in the world. So first you have to find the truth within yourself, and that's the Christ. And until you do that, you'll never be able to measure the outside world, anything outside of the Christ accurately. You won't be able to measure yourself, and you won't be able to measure the world. Once you've established a foundation in the Christ within, then you can finally see yourself accurately. Once you can see yourself accurately, then you can see through yourself to the outside world and discern what's going on. The outside world is infinite. Every little corner is a whole world in of itself. There are people that live in the same city, and they have a completely different experience in that same city. There are people that can find no financial opportunities in that city. They can't find any romantic opportunities. They may be starving in that same city. And yet someone else has plenty of money, plenty of love, and plenty of food. But it's the same city. It might not even be that big of a city. In fact, it could be a small town where you're having that dramatic difference. And because that's the nature of reality, is that every little small portion of it is an infinite space. And it's meant to be that way so that everyone can have the experience that they need without interfering with the experience of anyone else. Because reality is a mirror. It's like a butler. And the butler can provide, or the waiter can provide, a different meal for everyone at the same table without interfering with anyone else. So if you are focused on suffering, even in the best of times, so let's assume that the white hats will be wildly successful. Let's assume that the new Christic forces that are forming, they're going to be tremendously, impressively, massively successful beyond anyone's expectations. If you're still a negative person, you will be able to find negativity in that world. You will be able to find suffering in that world. You will be able to find evil in that world, because all you got to find is one little dark little shadow and go into it, and then open up an entire world within that shadow. That's just the way reality works. So this is why the Christ was just saying, just in what verse was it? We just read it. He says, don't worry from morning to evening or evening to morning about having clothes to wear or food to eat or any of it. Because as long as you have that Christ within you, then you'll always be in the part of the world that has the light. And the scriptures say that you can see 10,000 die on your left and 10,000 die on your right, and it won't touch you. As long as you stay, or as long as you obey the Christ within. And that's the power of it. And that's why we don't have to be afraid. And that's why we're going to win. Because those that are centered in conflict, and those that are centered in the darkness, and those that's all they can see, well, fine, let them have that version of reality. But that doesn't have anything to do with my world. You see, the Christ within me created me, and the Christ within me creates my world. And then from that place, then we can encourage others to make a better world and show them how to make their world better at all. But there's no need to change the entirety of reality. That's absolutely impossible anyway, because God is infinite and absolute. So there'll always be some portion of God that is some dark nightmare for those that choose to be that way. Sometimes a nightmare can be fun, but personally, I'm done with that in my life for now.
Yeah, well said. I completely agreed. I saw Cheryl had your hand raised. Did you want to say something, or was that a mistake? Oh, there you go. I saw your mic open, but then we're not getting any audio. Yeah, no worries. Not hearing anything on our end, but maybe that was just a mistake. Feel free to jump in if you want to. So we'll just move on to the next verse here. So coming down to verse 37, we're passing back to the disciples. His disciples asked, "When will be the day that you appear to us? When will be the day of your vision?" Ieshua replied, "On the day when you are naked as newborn infants who trample their clothing, then you will see the Son of the Living One, and you will have no more fear." So, what's being said here? They're asking, when will you appear to us? When will the Christ be here? And they might be referring to a literal point where he, quote unquote, returns. But this means so much more, is that when does the Christ appear within us? When is the Christ's return within us? Because we all have it. We're just remembering. We just forgot that we have it. So he replied, "On the day when you are naked as newborn infants who trample their clothing." And he emphasizes who trample their clothing. So not just that you are naked, but naked and willing to abandon and trample on your clothing. So what the clothing, what does that represent? That's the materialism. That's the identity, the persona, the ego, any of that, however you want to describe it. It's that attachment to that which holds us to this world. When we're naked as newborn infants who trample their clothing. So if we're willing to trample on that, not that we have to discard and trample on identity or persona or any of that kind of stuff, but just to be detached from it, to not let that guide your every move, because then it can flow, it can move, it can change. Our character can evolve, it can shift. We're a character in a story, in a grand story, and if we allow our character to continue to change and to grow and to move, not be held on to, oh, this is how my character was, or this is how people around me know me, or this is what my name tag says, or this is what my status, any of that. If we're attached to that, then we won't allow the free flow of Christ to move through us. So we have to be willing to take off that identity, take off that attachment, and trample it underfoot and say, yeah, it doesn't really mean anything to me, because it was just that for a time, and now it's something else. And it's in that moment, then you will see the Son of the Living One. Then you will be connected with the One, and you will have no more fear, because you know that. So there's nothing to fear.
Yeah, that's a home run right there. That's perfect. The clothing, the persona, it's a tool that the Christ uses in order to operate within this realm. You see, the Christ does not originate from this realm. The Christ originates from the realms above. But in his truest form, he can't even see this realm. It's because this realm is just a dream. He's on the other side of the veil. And the same way that when we're in this persona, we don't directly observe heaven to its fullest degree. Because down here, things are separated. Here is over here and there is over there. But in heaven, here and there is the same place. There's no here, there's no there, there's no future or past. Heaven is, everyone thinks heaven's bigger. It's actually much, much smaller. And so Christ uses the personas as a way to operate down in this realm. He moves inside of us. He sees out our eyes, handles things with our hands, goes from here to there with our feet so that he can accomplish his will from within us. But if our persona is too important, and if that's all we see, and if that's what's important to us, then, the Christ within us might want to make a right turn or a left, and then your persona wants to go in a different direction. Well, it becomes useless to the Christ. So in order to be useful to the Christ aspect of ourselves has to be more important than the persona. And there's many different personas we're going to have to pick up in our lives. Sometimes we're the student, sometimes we're the teacher. Sometimes, we're the one that has pleasure, sometimes we're the one that has pain. Sometimes we have to flee, sometimes we have to charge. In each of these personas, they're all tools of the Christ to serve the Christ. And we have to make sure that we move with the Christ so that we can stay in his light. Outside the light, in the darkness, that's the realm of the Antichrist, and that's the realm of fear. But in the light is the realm of faith. And the world operates completely different depending on whether you're in the light or not. The rules are different. Things act differently. There's being outside the light of the Christ. If the persona in you or of the Christ within you wanted something to be done and you disobey, and your persona is more important, that's a terrible position to be in. It's an untenable position. It's not defendable. But the Christ is that high mountain, that fortress that's all the way up, that extends out of heaven, that's indefeatable. And then, so Christ is never afraid.
Yeah, beautifully said. So just moving on to
the 37, 38, and 39 are all kind of like, they kind of go together.
Okay.
Because so the verses before, he was saying that his teachings were going to wage war on the world, and that his teachings could not be defeated because they would bind the strong man, right? And now he's continuing that. He's saying, I'm sending you on a mission. Me, I have to go back, right? So he's saying, well, that's kind of like the next verse. So he's kind of giving them a mission. This whole book, part of the way that you can tell that it's entirely legitimate is how it's one piece. Mm-hmm. It's one document. It just flows. It agrees with itself. And that really shows the Christ or the divinity within it, because Christ always agrees with Christ.
Right. So verse 38, Ieshua said, often you have wanted to hear the words I speak to you now. No one else can say them to you. And the days will come when you will seek me and do not find me. Yeah. So since he said they're related, we'll just continue to 39. Ieshua said, the Pharisees and the scribes have received the keys of knowledge and hidden them. They did not go within, and those who wanted to go there were prevented by them. So showing the gatekeepers, and
there's a last little piece there.
So, and as for you, be as alert as the serpent and as simple as the dove is the last line within verse 39. So just to show that. Okay. So what are we seeing here?
This is a very 39 is a very controversial verse.
Yeah.
The ending of it is, at least.
Right. So often you have wanted to hear the words I speak to you now. No one else can say them to you, and the days will come when you seek me and do not find me. So just saying that there will be dark moments where we don't inherently feel that light, when we have our dark days, or in the collective sense, when we go through dark ages and time periods where the Christ is seemingly very dim, where we have forgotten so much of ourselves, essentially. We've forgotten who we are, and that's what we're coming out of. So he's just giving them a heads up, like, this is not this is not a cakewalk, and this won't always be straightforward and simple. Because we'll wander into temptations, we'll veer off the path, we'll become the prodigal son and daughter, and we'll go on our wandering way. And all of that's purposeful so that we can come back to it and strengthen it. So he's iterating that. And then with 39, he's talking about the gatekeepers. And he talks about this in the book of Matthew as well. And I love that verse where he says, "Woe be unto you, scribes, Pharisees, and lawyers, hypocrites! For not only do you not enter the kingdom of heaven, but you guard the gates." Essentially, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but that's what he's sort of acknowledging here as well, because they know this, at least on an intellectual level, but they hide them because they're the slave masters or the wannabe slave masters. So they can't give the keys to the people that they're trying to groom into slaves. They don't go within, because if they did, they wouldn't do this. If they were truly connected with the Christ, they wouldn't do this.
Exactly.
And those who wanted to go there were prevented by them. And then, yeah, so just describing the gatekeepers very well, and why they do this. And this is why 6. I like to reference 6 as like it's a real test. It's a test of choice, because when we reach the 6th, hey Rowan, your mic is open. Just FYI, I didn't know if you knew that.
Yes, actually, I was just politely waiting because I didn't want to completely cut you off. Just the particular subject.
Hold up just a second. Let me finish the thought, but just keep your mic closed. Yeah, thanks. Appreciate that. So on the 6th is representative as the choice, because in a chakra perspective, 6 represents mastery over the 5. And we can achieve this mastery over the 5 and still do evil. And that's what the Pharisees and the scribes represent. They have mastered the 5, and all of the masses are still going to be locked in the 5. So they've reached the 6th, but 6 is the choice. Do I use this power to wield over the 5? Or do I bow in penitence and humility, gifting the 6th in service to creation as the Christ, and receive the 7th, divinity? So they've taken the choice and said, nope, I don't want to bow in humility. I want to use this as power to wield over others. And so they take that and they block the keys of knowledge and keep others from demonstrating that or learning this. So yeah, I want to hear from Darth on these 2 verses, and then we'll pass over to you, Rowan. Thanks for your patience. Go ahead.
So, Ieshua said, "Often you've wanted to hear the words I speak to you now," but he wasn't speaking the actual words he was speaking were the same words that's in the Old Testament. So they had heard the words before. What they had not heard was the spiritual, the occult meaning behind it. The ideas that the ideas that are in the Gospel of Thomas, you can find them all throughout the Old Testament. But never before did they have someone like Jesus, who was a fully realized ascended master, where his persona and the Christ within him were completely, totally unified. They had never encountered anyone like that. So they had often wondered, what do these words mean? They had heard them before. So they were elated to finally have a Christ amongst their midst to explain what these things meant. And no one else could say these words, because no one else at that time had that Christ within. So he was that singular source. Now it says in this part, I'm not saying this as doctrine or as an absolute truth. However, often in these occult literatures and among the Essenes, when they say that you're not going to see me for days, and they don't specify how many days, and they mean 2 days, right? So he didn't say there's going to be 1 day you're going to look for me. He said, no, there's days will come when you will seek me. So since it's not specified, it means 2. And in the occult literature, It's 1,000 years per day. So there's the possible interpretation that that listen, you've always wanted to have these things explained to you. No one could do it, but now I've done it. And so you're happy to hear these words, but I'm going to be gone for 2 days, and 1,000 years for a day. I'm going to be gone for 2,000 years. So for 2,000 years, you're going to be looking for me, and you will not find me. I'm not saying that that's an absolute truth. I'm just saying that's an occult interpretation of this scripture. Then he is giving them warning. Listen, you're going to have an enemy. And who is the enemy? It's the Pharisees and the scribes. So it's organized religion. That's the enemy, which is just the way that it is. You have the Christ within, and then you have people trying to be gatekeepers to the Christ, but they're without. So those are the Antichrist. And they've received the keys of knowledge, so they know what the occult meanings of these teachings are, but they've hidden them. And how did they hide them? They hid them behind symbols, and they hid them behind stories, and they hid them behind earthly meanings of a literal fleshly meaning. So when the scripture says the Christ is in your midst, okay, well, the actual meaning is that the Christ is within you. But no, they say, oh no, the kingdom is in your midst because Christ was there. So they always give everything a literal meaning. And as Justin mentioned, they did not go within. Okay, they didn't go within their own heart, and they didn't enter into the kingdom because they can't be. You can't have a parasitic persona with an activated Christ within, because the Christ would destroy the parasite. So if you're going to be a parasite, you gotta be in the dark. And then those that did search to enter into the kingdom within, they hid the meanings and they wouldn't explain it. And so you have billions of churchgoers that go into these beautiful buildings that are full of symbology and hidden meanings, and the priest doesn't explain it to them. Because if he did, no more money, no more power, no more prestige. And then he couldn't be the parasite. He couldn't get to the children. He couldn't blackmail them with their confessions. And so he has to prevent anyone from speaking this truth. But now the 2 days have passed, and now the Christ within is the Great Awakening is starting to happen. And what's the Great Awakening? It's people waking up to the Christ within, and the Christ within stirring himself. And so from beyond the veil, he's turning on the spigot. So there's like 2 spigots, right? There's the spigot on the other side of the veil that Christ has, and he can turn that on and off. And then there's the spigot that we control in our heart, and they both have to be on in order for the water to flow. If one spigot's on and one spigot's off, the water's not going to flow. They both got to be on. So there's times and seasons that emanate and originate from beyond the veil in the heaven. And so Christ comes back, and then he leaves, and he comes back and he leaves, right? Because he has to stay true to the divine music. And but when the opportunity is right, and when the Christ within us wakes up, that's the opportunity to listen and to pay attention. So he was saying, listen, I got to go. I'm very sorry about this, but what I've taught you is going to change the world. However, you have an enemy, organized religion, and they're going to try to stop us. And they're going to have 2 days to do their dirty works. And so then in the last sentence of verse 39, he says, but your instructions are to be as alert as the serpent, which takes us back to that the serpent that was trying to wake them up in the Garden of Eden. Be alert as that serpent, but you're going to be as simple as the dove. And as simple as the dove, the dove is a reference to those that have been elected by the Holy Spirit. So when Christ was baptized, he received a dove. So he's saying, be as pure as those that have been anointed with the Holy Spirit. Those that have the light of the Christ still within them, be as pure as they are. And that's the instructions that he gave to combat organized religion.
Right. To be both wise and innocent
Right.
simultaneously. That's the pure balance of the Christ, to be both the most wise and the most innocent at the same time. So the serpent's going to represent that kundalini, that caduceus, that energy within. So be as alert, have that energy, have that caduceus rise within you, but don't let that get to your head and wield it and turn you into this serious thing that, oh, it's all so serious and we have to be so reverent and somber and all of that. This is for us to enjoy and to have fun. So find the balance between these two, and yeah, that's great stuff there.
And then Tom,
Rowan, did you want to jump in? Go ahead, brother.
Yes, that was incredibly edifying to listen to. As wise and as innocent as the other. Oh man, that was good. I really enjoyed listening to that. And yeah, specifically about this whole lawyer subject is that, or occult truths, knowledge and wisdom, is that there are those who are wielding it and using it for the wrong purposes, to have power over others or to mislead. Same with priests who, if they simply told their followers or attendees what these symbologies and meanings are actually meaning, there would be no more money, there'd be no reputation or rank or prestige. And that's such a, what am I thinking? It's like a massive conflict of like interest, it seems, because just like how we were talking about particular clothes being worn during certain events or at certain locations because of respect towards one another, like truly good things, that nothing that you would call venomous. However, some lawyers, I do believe, are actually good people. And, you know, let's say, like, one example could be like a injury lawyer, like someone got into a car accident or something like that. And the only way that they're able to fight the system, because like I know we've touched on this particular subject a few times, is that it's very difficult to fight the system with intellect, because they always have this way, or almost like a method, of outsmarting you, no matter how smart you try to sound, or just beat them at their own game. They always have another trick up their sleeve, and that's what a lawyer's job is supposed to be. Is you hire them to protect you or your interests or your family, or for the greater good. It's not like you're trying to do anything bad. However, that seems to be like, I mean, I have sympathy for these people. I do think they exist. Is good lawyers or good priests. They're dressing up in their suits, or they're dressing up in their priestly gowns, or apparel, and they're having to swim with the rest of the sharks. And it's I think it's obvious. I don't think I'm sharing anything new here, but not all priests and not all lawyers are actually bad. And some of those people, like they made that, well, they all made that decision, whether they're good or bad, is they know that they're basically entering some form of dark cult, where the majority of them are entering it for manipulation or personal gain. And well, that's give me a second. Actually, I just want to make sure I'm not repeating myself here, because this is a very important subject, I think, for all people, whether they're here today listening to this or not, or listening to the recording later. Is that some lawyers, like, they have families. They're not like these pilots spraying chemtrails in the sky who have like no spouse, no kids, like no connection to their mom or dad. Like, they're basically just these NPC robots, and they do have a family. They do serve a purpose, and they have innocent people in their lives that depend on, how we depend on the Father, like to be like children, and to always go for him for guidance and for protection. And that's what these children of these lawyers or these priests also do. That's how they see their Father, and that's how they actually live their lives as lawyers and priests. And it just it makes me wonder, like, if we can't challenge the systems, like, let's say we're facing with a particular situation personally, where if we did not hire a lawyer, or if we did not consult with a priest or confess or whatever, we would have a much more difficult time, if not going through hell, like actual hell, to resolve a particular problem in this, very materialistic 3D world that we live in. I mean, how else are we supposed to handle these problems? Like, yes, we can go within, but what if what that means is when you go within, you find yourself interacting with a lawyer or interacting with a priest or someone who has this position of power that can greatly help you. But that's where it's like a double-edged sword, is that you need to have that skill, that wisdom that you were just describing, of like knowing basically who your enemy is and who is not, but also being innocent and being like a dove and just basically flying with the flow of the wind and, letting God do the good work. And that's where a lot of us throughout life are going to find ourselves, as we might have a property or a car or a situation where we have to consult with what we call a quote unquote professional, whether it's a priest, spiritually, or a professional lawyer legally. And I think we can learn a lot about this if you guys have some insight as to whether it comes from your own experience or friends of yours who have gone through traumatic times or good times because they consulted with one of these types of individuals. I'm greatly interested to learn more about this. I think we all need this type of wisdom, actually, because then we can be like doves and we can fly a bit more freely while being wise. So cut it off there, and I'd love to hear what you have to say, guys. Thanks.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't want to deviate too far away from the text and what we're discussing here. I think it's a great topic. So I'll just say quickly on it. When we have to recognize that the system was created to act, as this says in verse 39, to separate us from the keys of knowledge and hide them. So the legalese system, the church system, the religious systems, the banking systems, all of that is working in tandem for that same centralized goal. So whether somebody participating with them or not realizes that is a big distinguishing factor. So if, as you mentioned, if somebody is labeled a priest, but they recognize that the religious institution that they are working for is the problem, then yes, that can be a very worthy cause to get behind, because they're acting as somebody who's a source of light in a very dark space. But it gets very tricky very quickly when somebody believes that system is the good thing, when that's in fact designed to snuff out these lights. It's the same thing with lawyers in the legalese system. If they're participating, if they're acting in for the good nature of people and helping good people to navigate a very distorted and messed up system, a very dark space, and they know that system is designed to snuff out lights, then that's a very good lawyer that's acting with their knowledge and using that tool to dismantle it. But if they think that they're just, propping up the system and that's how it should be and all of that kind of stuff, then they're perpetuating it and they're actually causing more issue. So it gets tricky really quickly, and I don't want to get too deep into the nuances with this topic. But yeah, I know you had something you wanted to offer on that too.
The only thing I have to add to that is, so since we're talking about lawyers, but you can apply it to any profession. So there are no good lawyers, but there are many good men who happen to be lawyers, right? So then there would be like, there are no good cops, but there are many good men who happen to be cops. No good doctors, but many good men that happen to be doctors. So you have to get to know them for a bit and find out, do they identify as a good person or do they identify as a good lawyer? Because the goodness comes from the person. The goodness doesn't come from the law degree. And the goodness can't possibly come from the corporate state. It can only come from the Christ within the person. And so have they managed to hold on to their identity as a human within the corrupted system? And that's a tricky thing to do. I spent some time in law enforcement and I just about lost my soul. I came really close. It's really hard. The longer you're in that system, the dirtier you get. You get in bed with government, you wake up with fleas. So just see if the Christ within you, if they have a Christ within them that can resonate with the Christ within you, because the Christ will know. And that's why it's important to establish your own Christhood. That's why it's important to establish the absolute self within, outside of your persona, because that's the one. Your persona can be deceived, your persona can be tricked, but the Christ within cannot. So you have to use that as the indefeatable foundation to let you know, well, do I even need a lawyer? If I do need a lawyer, which lawyer? Be guided by that Christ within.
Yeah, agreed completely.
I agree too, and I sounded like a gorilla or a monkey going like ooh ooh ooh, like at all those bombs that you were just dropping there, Darth. That was really great. Thank you very much. I'll free up Mike. I just had to chip in and say, yeah, I sound like a monkey with how many times I said ooh, like getting in bed with the government, you wake up with fleas, man. That that was like a vegan croissant. Absolutely perfect. So thank you.
Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, Tom. Hi, guys. I'd just like to point out that's the last line that we're looking at here now, or the last two lines from chapter 39. As for you, be as alert as serpents and as simple as doves. Well, it's a talk that's, to me, from an astrological perspective, that's the serpent is representing of Scorpio, and the sexual energy, and Scorpio, when with the man in the zodiac, Scorpio is your generative system, and obviously the dove is like the eagle, which is also, you know, the higher mind, and you know, so I see that's Scorpio theme there, which is, you know, fixed water, you know, and water is emotion, so be in control of your emotions, and your desires, you know. So yeah, just thought I'd point that out.
That's great stuff, Tom. Thanks for that reminder. The Scorpio having the duality of both being the serpent or the scorpion, but also transmuting into the eagle, yeah, or the dove in this instance. So yeah, I like that. So yeah, moving on to verse 40.
40 and 41 go together.
Okay. So we'll read those two together. So Ieshua said, a grapevine planted away from the Father has no vitality. It will be torn up by its roots and will perish. Whoever has something in hand will be given more. Whoever has nothing, even the little they have, will be taken away. So a grapevine planted from the Father has no vitality. It will be torn up by its roots and will perish. So a grapevine planted away from the Father. So not by, away from, that's important. So if we're not imbued with that divine essence, then we have no life. If we have no foundation, you know, this is similar to the discussion around building your foundation on solid rock or the sand. If we're a grapevine planted away from the Father is like building a house on the sand. It has no foundation, it has no stability, it has no life. We have no life when we do that. So of course we'll be torn up by our roots and we'll perish. And the grapevine representing again, another perspective around the caduceus, or the rivers within, the twin serpents coiled around. Divine, the two vines, divine, two vine. And then whoever has something in hand will be given more. Whoever has nothing, even the little, they will be taken away. So that part is, whoever has something in hand will be given more. Whoever has nothing, even the little they have, will be taken away. So essentially saying, if we have any connection to the Father, if we have any connection to a reality, or if our persona is connected with the Christ in any capacity, even just the tiniest little bit, then we are built on that solid stability, even if it's very small. But if we're not, then we'll be lost. So yeah, that's my take there. What you got?
So the grapevine is any course of action, any line of reasoning, any thoughts, anything you tried to build, that's the grapevine. And if it doesn't originate with the Father is occult knowledge. And what occult, that's spiritual knowledge, right? That's because the occult is simply that which is hidden, right? It's that which is unmanifested. So if you are trying to do anything and you're not acting, if it's not springing out of the spiritual realms, then it's dead. It's dead. It's dead on arrival. It's stillborn. It's just, it's not sound, and it's going to be torn up by its roots. It's going to perish because it won't stand. It won't be able to resist. Because this is the same line of thought. Because if you go back, because remember, this is the same conversation. So first he's saying, listen, I'm going to leave. Okay. And I'm going to be gone for a couple of days, and you're going to be looking for me. You're not going to find me, and you're going to have to deal with organized religion, and they're going to try to stop anyone from getting into the kingdom. But for you, you got to pay attention. You got to be smart, and you have to be pure. And then he's saying, whatever you build, make sure that you don't forget the occult teachings that I've taught you. Don't forget the spiritual stuff that I've taught you. Otherwise, these Pharisees and these antichrists, they're going to rip it up, and they're going to destroy what you're trying to do. And he's saying, whoever has something in hand, so whoever has this occult knowledge that you are the Christ and that God is within you, if you have that, then you're going to be given something more. So what's the something more that you're going to get? More teachings, more insights, more revelations, because now you have the Christ within you. But if you don't have that, if you don't have the occult knowledge, then what little you do have, so even your existence here on the earth, you're going to lose that, because you live, remember, Christians or Christ lives by faith. We don't live by our hands and our feet and our fists and our guns and our money. We don't live by that. That stuff can't preserve you alive. Many wealthy people have died. Many powerful people have died, right? But faith keeps you alive. And it's faith and knowledge of that we're spiritual beings acting in a spiritual environment that we can't see with our fleshly eyes. So we have to hold on to our occult knowledge. We have to hold on to our spiritual knowledge so that we can receive more, and so that we can keep what we have, which is our life.
Yeah, love it. Cool. Well, that sounds good to me. All right, so moving on to verse 42. Very simple. Ieshua said, be passers-by. So this one immediately brings the image that I often like to visualize when I'm sometimes in a meditation, or if I'm just feeling overwhelmed by all the thoughts. I like to envision that I'm standing on a bridge over a river, and that all the thoughts are in the water. They're the stream of consciousness just flowing by. And of course, I can hear all of those thoughts. I can see them. I can interact with them. But really, they're just in a river, and they're just passing by. So that visual really helps me to not identify with the thoughts, not be attached to the thoughts. And it helps to sort of quell that energy that thoughts can bring, especially when we're in a flurry of them. And even in that, just as water is very calming to hear that sound, I hear the river flowing, and that starts to slow down the attachment or the attention on the thoughts. And then whatever thought needs to come through, whatever feels right, often does surface. Maybe not in that moment, but it helps it to. So be passers-by. Maybe that's alluding to that. Be someone who's not attached to every little thought and every little aspect of this experience, and truly just allowing that to flow. So That's what I see.
So this is so he's saying being passersby, he's saying be alone or be solitary, but it's in contrast to the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the church of that time, that they were building these massive religions with these massive temples, and he's saying that just be alone, act alone, not to create any other institutions, but just, the family is good, you're good, what you speak on your own authority, but not your authority of this persona, but the authority of the Christ within the persona. So don't be building these massive organizations, because what's a church? What's a massive organization? It's just a super persona, right? That then consumes and controls all the individual personas within it. And there's no Christ in that. We don't need that. What's the point of building a church? It's still just the Christ within. So he's saying, he's giving them their marching orders. Whatever you do, make sure that it comes out of the spiritual realm. Make sure that you hold on to your spiritual knowledge, and don't build organizations, because there's a saying, if government doesn't control anything, then you don't have to worry about who controls the government, right? So if there's no church to corrupt, then there can be no corruption. Of course, they immediately built a church, but, well, not immediately, but, it took a few hundred years. But you build a church, it's going to get corrupted. You create a government, it's going to get corrupted. So that's why Ieshua was saying, be passersby, be solitary. As a solitary man with the Christ within, that's enough to do good in the world. You don't need a uniform to do good. You can just wear ordinary clothing and help someone walk across the street, help someone homeless. You start grouping together, and the antichristic person is going to slip in the group and then rot the whole structure from within. And we're learning this painfully. We've learned it as the 2 days have gone by.
Yeah. So not throwing shade on community or having connections in that sense, but just don't build your whole
family-based community. So as
right.
an individual, as a man or a woman, you have a mother, you have a father, you have brothers, you have sisters. These are all natural institutions. Mm-hmm. But if you leave that familial organization, or if you take something, you put it above the family, mm-hmm. you can take families and link them together. Okay. But whatever structure you built is under the family, subject to the authorities of those families. Right. But if you take something and build it and put it over the family, mm-hmm. now you've created a demon, you've created an idol, and now you're subject to it, and you set that fire ablaze. Can you put it out? Maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. All right. So verse 43, it says, the disciples asked him, who are you to say these things to us? Ieshua replied, do you not know me from what I say to you? Or have you become like those Judeans? If they love the tree, they despise the fruit. If they love the fruit, they despise the tree. This reminds me of Life of Brian, the People's Front of Judea. No, we're the Judean People's Front. Life of Brian, anybody? But as far as the reference to Judea, I'm sure there's more there. But generally, it seems to be just illustrating contradictory nature. So if they love the tree, they despise the fruit. If they love the fruit, if they despise the tree. So this is kind of similar to him speaking about make sure both ears are in alignment, make sure all of self is in alignment. Yeah, and sort of a warning against hypocrisy. But there's probably something deeper to the Judean meaning. Or, yeah, what do you see here?
So the disciples, recognizing that he just set them at war with the rest of the world for the next 2,000 years, and he's just revealed all of these. He revealed the Father, the occult mysteries, to them, And so they're just kind of flabbergasted. Who are you to say these things to us, you know? And he's saying, don't you recognize me from what you've read in the scriptures, that he was the one, that he was the Christ within. It was hard for them to understand. And then he says, have you become like those Judeans? So when he says Judeans, back when Israel was 12 tribes, 10 became apostate and they left. And there was just the 2 tribes of Judah and I forget what the second tribe was. But the 10 tribes was replaced by the Assyrians. They brought, because what would happen back then is that a conquering nation would shuffle people around. You know, they would take 2 nations and switch them. And the reason they would do that is to rip up everyone's roots, put them in unfamiliar lands, unfamiliar practices, disorient people, separate them from their past. It's a wartime tactic. And so they replaced the 10 tribes with people from other nations. And those people eventually did come to worship Yahweh, but they were actually worshiping their old gods through the practices of Yahweh. Because when they showed up in the land of Israel, they started worshiping their old gods according to the old practices. And then Yahweh showed up and killed a bunch of them. And so they went to the tribe of Judah and they're like, listen, your God is in this land and he's killing us. How do we worship him so that he'll stop killing us? And so the Judeans showed them how to follow the Mosaic law. And so they started a hybrid religion where they were worshiping both Yahweh and their demon gods, but according to the Mosaic law, following those spiritual practices. So when you fast forward several hundred years to the time of Jesus, the land of Judea was a mixed, it was like New York City, right? So you can say, oh, you're a New Yorker, but it doesn't mean you're an American, right? Because New York is full of all kinds of foreigners. And so that was the origin of sort of modern day Judaism, where you have all these people that they're, you know, Judeans or Jews, but they're not Hebrew, and they're not actually a descendant of Abraham. And so they had a certain attribute to them. So they loved the tree. So they loved the scriptures. They loved them. They loved the 5 books of Moses, but they didn't like the fruit. And what was the fruit? The fruit was the Christ, or the law of the Christ. Or they liked Christ and his miracles, but they didn't like the divine law. So they were in opposition. See, in order to really truly become Christic in nature, you have to love the Father, you have to love the spiritual nature, the occult, what's hidden. You have to love the divine scriptures, the law, and then you also have to love the Christ. You can't just pick. You can't be like, well, I like Christ because, you know, he takes care of me, and, you know, and the law of attraction and all that, you know, Christic jazz. But I don't really like the law. And sometimes I don't follow the law of Christ, and I'm selfish and greedy and harsh and mean. And I don't appreciate spiritual things. Well, that you're not going to have a good outcome. You have to love the tree and the fruit. You can't, they're unified together, because one causes the other. And then, so the cause becomes the effect, and then the effect becomes the cause. See, the Father and the Son, they're all one thing.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I don't have anything more to add there. So
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
You will be hard pressed to find Christ saying anything good about the Judeans.
Yeah.
And he also did not worship the God of the Judeans. And nowhere in the scriptures will you find that the Romans, where the scriptures were accuses the Romans of killing Jesus, though they did actually carry out the technical execution. That's not what the scriptures say.
Right.
So who were these Judeans? Well, they weren't actually even Hebrews. They were shipped in people. So we see this today in Europe and America, where they try to suppress the birth rates of the native peoples. You know, they try to suppress the birth rates of Americans. They try to suppress the birth rates of Irish and the French and the Germans. Overpopulation, suppress the birth rates, break up the families. And then what do? They bring in all these people, foreigners, in order to overwhelm the healthcare systems, overwhelm the education systems, overwhelm law enforcement. And it's was a genocide. It's been happening a long time. All this has happened before and will happen again. So that's what they did. So these are the Judeans that he was talking about, not Hebrews.
Wow. All right. So moving on to verse 44. Ieshua said, "Whoever blasphemes against the Father will be forgiven, and whoever blasphemes against the Son will be forgiven. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven, either on earth or in heaven." So, whoever blasphemes against the Father will be forgiven. So, the Father is the highest quality God. Whoever blasphemes against the Son, which is the Christ within, will be forgiven. But whoever blasphemes against the Holy Spirit will not be forgiven, either on heaven or in earth.
It's not fair. There's no way you could. It's because what he did is he changed the positions of who's who. So before, when he was talking about the Father, he was talking about the occult. But in this verse, the Father is not the occult. The Father is the Old Testament. Because I should have told you to do 43 and 44 together. So before he was talking about the tree and the fruit, okay, and the tree is the Old Testament or the scriptures, and the fruit is the Christ, right? So now he's saying the same idea again, but this time with different characters. And he's already talked about the Father, but now the Father is not the same entity. So before the Father was the occult, now it's not. Whoever blasphemes against the Father, that's the Old Testament, will be forgiven. So if you break the law of Moses, there's a possibility to be forgiven. And if you blaspheme against the Son, that's the New Testament, there's still the possibility to be forgiven. But if you blaspheme against the Holy Spirit, which is him, the Christ within, the power of the Christ within, well, now that you'll not be forgiven either in heaven, earth, or in heaven. So that the earth and heaven part, that's actually literal. So you can not know about the Mosaic law. You might not know about all the occult mysteries, and you can violate. This is actually how it works, because no persona can obey the Christ perfectly. Okay. My persona is imperfect. Justin stayed with me for a while, well aware of the fact. My persona has got some flaws, right? And that's the same with everyone. So how is it that this persona, which is imperfect, can have a good outcome, right? Isn't your destination supposed to be the same as your origin? So my origin is imperfection. Then I should end up in imperfection? No. What happens is that the Christ within me corrects for my mistakes. So you might blaspheme against the Father out of ignorance. That's the Old Testament, the knowledge of the occult. Since you're blind to it and you're just stumbling through life and you make all kinds of mistakes. Well, you can be forgiven. Forgiven by whom? The Christ, who's controlling all things. Okay. You might blaspheme against the Son. That's the New Testament. That's the law of the Christ. You could make horrible mistakes, right? You can still be forgiven. But if you blaspheme against the Holy Spirit, which is the power of the Christ within, well, now you're screwed. And you're going to be screwed both on earth by men, and you're going to be condemned also in heaven, that's all of reality, earth and heaven. So because most people don't learn about the Christ within. There are many. I work with many in the clothing bank. I work with a lot of beautiful ladies, okay, and they're very traditional, old school Christians. And if I were to tell them that, listen, you're actually the Christ and you're God, it would be shocking to them, right? They don't know. And yet they're very Christic angels. They're beautiful, sweet women that would never hurt a fly, and they're following the Christ within. They just don't know it. See, so because they identify themselves as their persona, the Christ within is hidden, and yet their persona is still in unity with the Christ within. So they can be used by the Christ to work out the will of the Christ.
So they're in that in that example, they would be blaspheming against the Son or the Father,
but not against the Son.
But not against the Son, because
right, and not against the Holy Spirit.
But definitely not against the Holy Spirit, because that's the essence that they live.
Correct. Right. And then you might have some Muslim and some I don't know, Sanzakistan or something, wherever out in the Middle East. Okay, they don't even believe in the Christ. Their religion doesn't really acknowledge the divinity of the Christ, so they're blaspheming against. And the religion doesn't give them any knowledge of the occult, so they're blaspheming against the Father and the Son, and yet they're still a good person. Even though their religion tells them to do awful things, they refuse, and they still follow the Christ within. All good people are Christic in nature, and everyone is born within the Christ. Yeah, everyone is born. Almost all babies are born Christic in nature. Very rare, extremely rare to have a baby not born in Christic nature. Almost impossible. So there are lots of people that are violating, sinning against the Father and the Son, but they're still good people because they're following the Holy Spirit, the Christ within.
And it doesn't say will not be forgiven eternally, but as long as we are blaspheming against the Christ within, as long as we're holding the antichristic nature, then we will not be forgiven.
Well, right? the trouble, the seriousness of it is that if the Christ within, if you, for this though, to get to that point, you have to know what you're doing. To sin against the Holy Spirit is not done in ignorance. At some point, the person makes a deliberate intention and knowing choice. They're like, I have the desire to do good, right? The Christ within me is impelling me to do good, but no, I'm actually, see, there's one thing, like let's say you're a good person, but you're struggling with alcoholism, right? So your body is just reaching out for that drink, right? And you don't want to, and you're struggling, that persona's fighting, and maybe you give into the persona and you pick up the drink and you drink it, or you do the drugs, or you have, or you have sex and violate your marriage or whatever, right? But that's not what this is talking about. This is talking about someone that actually wants to do good, that the body wants to do good, and then they're intentionally doing what's bad. And then what happens is the Christ within says, oh, I'm gone. I split. It leaves. What's left? An empty persona. And then that empty house can then be filled with other darker entities. And then what happens is that when the Christ leaves, it takes reincarnation with it. So the persona can no longer reincarnate because it's severed its connection to Christ. And all it has is the demons. And so this is why these people, they get crazy desperate looking for eternal life. They're willing to steal adrenochrome in the lifespan of others because they have to stay alive, because they sinned against the Christ within, the force of the Christ within, so that when they die, boom, done.
Yeah.
Now, those dark entities can reestablish contact with other individuals, but that's a whole another topic. So if you sin against the Holy Spirit and you deliberately work against the Christ and deliberately sever your connection, you really are done both on heaven and earth. Because you can't go back to heaven, because to go back to heaven, you got to have faith and you have to have gratitude. And you can't go back to earth because when Christ left, he took reincarnation. So it's a serious thing. When you have that urge to do good, better do it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying to be like, I'm not saying to, give your last dime to strangers and don't feed your kids. I'm saying don't, when you have that Christic urge.
Right.
Because Christ is not foolish.
Right.
And Christ will take care of his children first.
Right. Yeah. Great points there. All right. So moving on to.
We still got time?
Oh, yeah. Actually.
Are we doing good?
We're kind of at the time limit. Maybe we should pass to see if anybody wants to discuss, or do you want to do one more?
Let's give people a chance to talk.
Yeah. Does anybody want to jump in, discuss anything? Kind of want to keep these around 2 hours, just so they're not too overwhelming. And you'll notice we're not going through this fast either. This series will take as long as it needs to take. This is a book that's not. It's so much better when you don't do it quickly. So I have no intention on speeding up or making this go any length of time. So yeah, if anyone has anything to jump in with, thoughts on what we've discussed, things that you noticed, questions about anything, now would be a great time. And no worries if not either. I know it's a lot to digest, and yeah, did you have anything else, or do you want to do one more? Feel complete?
I feel like this is a good place.
Yeah, feels like a good spot. Ending at 44, the double 4, and we've got 45 for next week, which is a great number, or for the next episode. So
Dude, this is a heavy. It's a small book, but it is a heavy book.
yes,
And it's this. I don't want to say it's like a steak. I don't know it's a good,
it's like
solid
a mango.
meal. It's like a mango.
It's like a mango. It's like the most delicious golden mango you've ever sunk your teeth into.
Yeah.
What juice is just dripping down your mouth. Every bit of it is just delicious.
Thinking
And it's
like
nourishing.
A big stew, a vegetable stew with lots of different vegetables and lots of things lots of different flavors and lots of different things to pick out and taste. And
yeah,
it's so good.
fulfilling. And
but from the very first verse all the way now, it's been one single conversation flowing.
Yeah, so I'd recommend anybody to go back through and just read the text yourself on your own, at least up until we've gotten to, and you'll have what our discussions to kind of percolate in your thoughts as you read through it and kind of have things jump out at you, but to see that flow of this text as it shows to you. And if you find anything else in the text or have any questions or things that come up, feel free to comment anywhere or reach out to me any which way, and we'll make sure we discuss it in the next episode. And I did want to mention that I don't know. So starting Friday, I'm going to be doing some fasting, and I'm planning on doing a complete digital detox. So turning off all electronics, having at least a few days of that, but I might go longer. So next week will be kind of up in the air as far as which shows I do. So just I'll let everybody know, of course, with announcements and things if we do end up doing that. But just a heads up that we might have a little hiatus as I do. Just a little spring cleaning as we celebrate the equinox and shift into this astrological new year. It's a great opportunity to come in with a clean slate, and that's my plan. So yeah, if no one else has anything, I think we'll just go ahead and wrap up and call it a night, or call it a day wherever you are. Did you have any closing comments or things else to say?
Yeah, so this whole comment Ieshua was saying about blaspheming against the Father, blaspheming against the Son, because I think it's almost like, what's it called? It's what is it? It's the military has a thing where they're saying when you can fire your weapon, rules of engagement. Yeah, there's verse 44 is the ROE, rules of engagement, that he's giving his soldiers, because they're going to go to war against the strong man, and they have to overturn everything in the house of the strong man. They have to reveal all the lies. And so he's telling them this, and this is how you can get knowledge. Make sure you stay rooted in the spiritual realm. Make sure that you treasure this. And then he's saying, whoever blasphemes against the Father, don't worry about it. If you blaspheme against the Son, don't worry about it. But whatever you do not blaspheme against the Holy Spirit. And that's almost like instructions for the white hats, because they've had to infiltrate black hat organizations. And what sort of things do they have to do in order to get close to these black hats? Because the black hats at one point had all control of all the levers of power. So those levers of power had to be taken away from the black hats and put under white hat control, so that then they could use the levers of power of this massive system of systems in order to protect children and rescue children. And what sort of things did they have to do? But whatever they did, make sure that they didn't blaspheme against the Christ within.
Right. It's for the greater good.
For the greater good. Yep.
Yeah.
It's like going undercover, right?
Yeah.
That just came to me just now.
Yeah. No, it's a great
That
point.
I bet you there's been a lot of soldiers that have been having to read this.
Yeah.
You know,
In some form
I
or
can't,
another.
you know, the things that they had to do, and then when no one's looking, just break down in tears for
Right.
what they had to do to not blow their cover.
Yeah, truly. Yeah.
And
Great
the
point.
women. And the women, because a lot of times it's been up to the women to do this sort of espionage work.
Yeah. Yeah. Teresa M. Hey, sister, did you want to jump in?
Well, I just wanted to find out where the best place is to go to find the Gospel of Thomas.
Yeah, so the link to the PDF that I'm using is in the post for the show, and you're welcome to download that and print it out. You know, you can take it to a nice print place and get them to ring bind it if you want it in like a book-ish form. As far as purchasing a book, I haven't bought one myself. I'm just using this PDF, so I don't have any experience as far as a purchase, you know, like print that you could buy. But the PDF is free and easy to take to a printer, and it's not very long either, so it won't take you very many pages to print out if you did want a physical copy. So that would be my route if I were gonna print it out physically, would be to use this one. But it does have some extra pages in the original language and things of that nature that you could exclude if you didn't want to print all of it. So yeah, does that help?
Well, yeah, I share some of my information with my 84-year-old father, and he really couldn't find a copy the other day, I guess, on his search, but I'll see if I can share this with him.
Yeah. Just feel free to share the direct link to him. If you need me to send that link to you, I'm happy to do that. And that's what I've used. And I haven't done a ton of searching to see. I mean, this PDF is of a physical book, so it might be for sale somewhere as well if you wanted to purchase it. But yeah, that would be the best way.
Okay. Thank you guys for everything you do for us.
Thank you too, sister. Appreciate, and always good to hear from you. And thanks for popping on. Yeah. Anybody else got anything before we wrap up today? All right. Well, as always, just sending out lots of love. Thank you all for being here so much. You know, it's so much more fun to do this together. So thank you for joining this ride with us. Thank you for participating and just listening. And let's go out and let that light shine. So thank you all. Have a good night or day, wherever you are. Take care.